Caroline Driscoll, the president's press secretary, stood near the door. She was holding her iPad close to her chest like a shield. She knew not to speak when the president was quiet. "James Boasberg," Trump finally said in a flat voice. "He thinks he's running the country now." Caroline stepped forward. "Judge Boasberg's ruling uses the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. "I know what it says," Trump snapped. He didn't shout, but his voice was sharp. He picked an old dusty law, added today's anger to it, and called it justice. On the coffee table in front of him was a thick folder. It was full of immigration policies, border maps, and court notes, all marked with red ink. Trump stood up. "They're trying to make me lose control," he said. "They want me to do something wrong so they can call me a dictator on TV for the next 5 weeks." Pam Bandy walked in from the West Wing. She wore dark navy clothes, no jewelry, just a notepad and a serious face. "It's not just El Paso anymore," she said. "The Boston court has slowed flights from Phoenix, Tucson, and Brownsville. ICE is rushing to respond." Trump looked angry. "We are enforcing immigration law," he said, "and they're calling it a constitutional crisis." Pam looked at her notes. "It's more serious than that," she said. "They're getting ready to start contempt charges. They say we're acting in bad faith." He said it publicly. There was silence. Trump looked out the window at the South Lawn. He wasn't looking at the cameras or reporters. He was looking far away, thinking. "Contempt," he repeated, almost laughing. "They used to say that when I tweeted. Now they say it when I protect the border." Caroline finally spoke. "The media is already watching. If we stay quiet, they'll create their own story." "Good," Trump said without turning around. "Let them write it." He stepped back into the room, now with more energy in his voice. "We'll give them something worth writing." Pam raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I'm not letting a few judges wearing black robes ignore the people who elected me. If Chief Justice Roberts wants to protect the system, then he should do it in public." Caroline looked shocked. "You want to talk to the court?" Trump didn't answer. He walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and took out a folded paper, the judge's order. He held it up like a prop in a courtroom. "Let's see if they still believe in being honest when the lights and cameras are on." Pam took a deep breath. "You're calling them out." "Live?" "Every single one of them," Trump said. "Starting with John Roberts. If he thinks this is just about legal steps, then he hasn't been paying attention." Caroline tapped her iPad nervously. "You'll be accused of turning the courts into politics." "I'm not turning it into politics," Trump said. "I'm showing the truth." He paused, then looked at both women. "The American people didn't vote for federal judges. They voted for a president, and I'm not going to watch this system turn into a courtroom monarchy while they pretend they're protecting democracy." Pam nodded slowly. "Then we better prepare for a storm." Trump smiled faintly. "Let it come." But what started in a courtroom was about to erupt in front of the entire nation. The statement hit Washington like a thrown brick wrapped in silk. It wasn't a press conference, no podium, no sound bites, just a brief PDF uploaded to the Supreme Court's official site at 9:03 a.m. But by 9:07, every newsroom, blog, and phone screening in America was lit up with the same headline Chief Justice Roberts responds to: Trump's call for impeachment. Pam Bandy read it twice before walking into the West Wing briefing room. "This isn't a defense of the courts," she said quietly, handing the printout to Caroline. "It's a warning." Caroline scanned the page. Robert's words were cold and calculated. Impeachment is not an appropriate response to a legal disagreement with a judge. The judiciary must stay independent, even when its decisions are not popular or convenient. Trump wasn't in the Oval Office. He was downstairs in the Roosevelt Room with Senator Felix Morton from Florida and Carl Higdon, Deputy Director of DHS. Both men had cleared their schedules as soon as Roberts spoke. They knew Trump wouldn't stay quiet. "He's just showing off," Morton said, flipping a pen in his hand. "He's trying to remind America that the courts are special." Trump set his coffee down. "Special ground," he said. turned it into a battlefield. Carl leaned in. The order from Boasberg wasn't review. That was sabotage. They've started blocking policies before they even start. Trump nodded. And now Roberts wants to hide behind tradition, like those robes make them untouchable. He stood up, his movement making everyone go quiet. This is no longer about policy. It's about control. Pam entered quietly and placed a statement in front of him. Trump didn't need to read it. He already knew what it would say. Roberts never yelled. He just used long sentences that sounded important. "What's the plan?" Morton asked. Carolyn had joined them. "The media will call it a call for unity," she said, "a measured leadership in tough times. But the people see it for what it really is. Deflection. They want to give judges permanent power to block everything." Trump replied, "They don't want to win elections. They want to stop anyone who does." He walked slowly to the fireplace, the same one presidents have used since Roosevelt. "We gave them years to fix this. What did they do? Held meetings, gave speeches. And now when I act, they scream tyranny." Pam crossed her arms. "What's your plan, Mr. President?" Trump didn't answer right away. He turned and looked at them, not as colleagues, but like soldiers ready for a mission. "They want court rulings," he said. "We'll give them courtroom cameras." Felix Morton raised an eyebrow. "You're serious?" "I want a live session. I want Roberts sitting across from me, and I want the American people watching. No speeches, no hidden details. I want faces. I want accountability." Carl Higdon looked unsure. "You think they'll agree?" "They won't have a choice," Trump replied. "I'll call it a legal summit, a national meeting on judicial limits. They say they want transparency? Let's test that." Carolyn was already typing on her iPad. "The media will flood it. Roberts will look like he's hiding if he refuses." Felix laughed, not believing it. "This will break every rule we've ever followed." Trump picked up the Boasberg order again. Trump stared at the paper. So did the judge when he overruled the entire Department of Homeland Security with one signature. Pam let out a breath through her nose. "We need a name. Something that gets attention." Trump thought for a moment. "Call it the National Judicial Reform Summit." Caroline looked up. "You want it at the Supreme Court?" "No," Trump said. "I want it inside the Supreme Court." The room went quiet. The meaning was clear. This wasn't just about a speech or a statement. This was a call to confrontation. One branch of government against another, with no hiding behind anything. Felix looked at Pam. "He's serious." Trump nodded once. "They wanted a fight they could win in silence. I'm dragging it into the light." But Trump wasn't going to answer with a tweet this time. He wanted a microphone and a stage. The official invitation went out just after midnight. No leaks, no hints to the press, no whispers from aides. Just a formal email sent from the president's office, stamped with the seal. It was addressed to the Supreme Court. "You are formally invited to participate in the National Judicial Reform Summit. It will be live and on record in the Supreme Court chamber. The topic is public discussion on judicial power, nationwide orders, and the balance of power in the Constitution." By 8 a.m. the next morning, the news exploded. CNN called it a bold move. Fox ran with "Trump demands accountability from the court." MSNBC called it a stunt, but no one could ignore it. Chief Justice John Roberts read the invitation in silence. He didn't call a press conference or issue a statement. Instead, he met with three of his colleagues, Justices Linda Yang, Edward Salazar, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, in a private room down the hallway. Roberts placed the letter flat on the table. "He wants to turn this into a televised confrontation," Yang said, frowning. "This has never been done." "He's not asking," Salazar muttered. "He's daring us to say no." Jackson leaned forward. "Do we ignore it, dismiss it, meet privately?" Roberts looked at the paper, his face unreadable. If we refuse, we hand him the story that we're hiding, that we're afraid. Yang shook her head. This isn't a forum. It's a trap. Roberts finally looked up. Then we'll go in with clear minds and stay controlled. He wants drama. We'll respond with respect. That's the line we draw. But across town, in a room filled with flags and framed maps, Trump was planning something very different. We're not just showing up, he told his team. We're staging a reckoning. The summit would be historic. Cameras would be allowed, and every word would be recorded. There would be 2 lecterns, one under the Supreme Court's seal and the other beneath the presidential eagle. Carolyn was on her 3rd cup of coffee, typing up press passes. We've had over 200 media requests in 3 hours, she said. International news is asking for floor access. Pambandi went over security plans. We'll need federal marshals, Capitol Police, Secret Service, the whole network. This isn't just politics, it's a national event. Felix Morton walked in holding a folded copy of Roberts' statement. He's agreed to attend. He's bringing 3 justices with him. He said he won't prepare a speech. He wants to speak without a script. Trump smiled, but it wasn't out of amusement. It was out of purpose. Perfect. The more unfiltered, the better. Caroline looked up. What's the goal? Trump leaned on the edge of the table. To break the illusion. They've been wrapped in formality for so long that they think it makes them untouchable. The people need to see them not as symbols, but as men and women who can be wrong. Pam hesitated. And if they try to turn this around on you? Paint. You as the tyrant? Trump didn't hesitate. Let them. The difference is I answer to the voters. They answer to no one. Preparations moved quickly. By the end of the day, a team from the architect of the Capitol had installed lights inside the chamber. The lecterns were set up. Sound checks were done. The Secret Service swept the area. Outside, reporters set up in sidewalk spots with folding chairs and thermoses. Protesters gathered on both sides of the building, holding signs. One group chanted for judicial independence, while the other held banners that said, "Let the people govern." At 10 p.m., Trump stood alone in the empty East Room of the White House, looking at the freshly printed notes in his folder. No speechwriter had touched them. It was just him, his thoughts, and his warnings. Felix walked in quietly. Are we good for tomorrow? Trump didn't look away from the paper. We're better than good. He slowly closed the folder. Tomorrow, America hears what they weren't supposed to. But no one expected what Trump was about to say in front of the camera. The Supreme Court chamber had never seen anything like it. Not once in its long history had a sitting president stood eye to eye with the Chief Justice of the United States, not through lawyers or court papers, but in the very heart of American law, with cameras rolling and the whole country watching. At exactly 11 a.m., Donald Trump entered from the East Corridor. No teleprompter, no prepared notes, just a slim leather folder under one arm and a stare that didn't move. He didn't wave or smile. He walked to the podium like he had done it 100 times before, alone, unshaken, and ready to speak. Across from him, Chief Justice John Roberts sat at the head of the bench, with Justices Yang, Salazar, and Jackson next to him. His hands were clasped in front of him, his posture straight, calm, and measured, just like always. The sound of camera clicks filled the edges of the room. Live broadcasts were already running. Fox, CNN, MSNBC, and even smaller networks all showed the same banner. The Judicial Summit live from the Supreme Court. Trump looked around the room once, then started speaking. When I promised to defend this country, I didn't think I'd be here, speaking not to enemies overseas, but to silence, robed in formalities. But here we are. He paused, then continued. A federal judge recently stopped my administration from deporting people we considered a threat, based on laws that are older than most people in this room. And when we tried to enforce the law anyway, because law should matter, more than opinions, We were accused of acting in bad faith. He held up the folded order from Judge Boasberg. This isn't law. This is leverage. Roberts didn't move. The cameras briefly showed his face, still unreadable. Trump kept going. Now, they're telling us that impeachment isn't right, that we should wait, appeal, and follow the process. But how long do you wait when judges block policies before they even start? How many injunctions until the people who voted for change get none of it? His voice was steady, not shouting, but full of energy. This country wasn't built so 700 unelected judges could rule it from behind closed doors. He turned slightly toward Roberts. Chief Justice, I say this with respect for your position, but not for your doctrine. When the people ask for action and the courts answer with silence, that's not neutrality. That's surrender. Roberts leaned forward, gently adjusting his glasses. In a calm and clear voice, he responded, Mr. President, with respect, this institution exists not to reflect public passion, but to calm it. Courts are not rescue teams for delayed policies. They are not tools for political urgency. Trump didn't interrupt. He listened, his arms folded across his chest. Roberts continued, You talk about overreach, but this court has reviewed executive action as far back as Marbury versus Madison. That's not rebellion. That's responsibility. The judiciary is not a threat to the Constitution, Mr. President. It is its protector. Trump stepped forward. Then why does it feel like it only protects one side? The room was still. No gasps, no applause, just silence. Trump opened his folder and pulled out a copy of the Declaration of Independence. The cameras zoomed in. Every news network adjusted its focus. This document didn't create kings. It destroyed them. He looked down, then up, again. And if we let the judiciary make national decisions in isolation, without consequences or elections, we haven't just lost balance. We've lost the republic. He dropped Judge Boasberg's order onto the floor, letting it fall. He paused, letting the moment sink in. They call it judicial review. I call it judicial rule. Roberts flinched, just enough for anyone watching to notice. Trump looked directly at the camera. You were told the courts protect you, but when one judge can cancel your vote with a stamp, that isn't protection. That's stealing power. He paused. And today, in this chamber, we're giving that power back. But the silence that followed wasn't out of respect. It was the realization that the room no longer belonged to the judges. Elon Musk didn't sit during the summit. He stood in the back corner of the Supreme Court chamber, leaning against the wall like someone who already knew where this was all going. With a phone in his hand, he typed one sentence into X as Trump walked back to the podium. A courtroom just became a battlefield. By the time Trump reached for the Declaration of Independence again, that post had already reached 2 million views. But Trump wasn't looking for views or applause. What he wanted, what he always wanted, was clarity. He turned the paper slowly in his hands and said, Not to the court, but to the nation. Thomas Jefferson warned us about men in power who look virtuous while quietly stealing the people's voice. He paused, then read a line clearly and slowly. An oligarchy in robes is still an oligarchy. The weight of those words landed like a stone in the room. The phrase cut through years of legal tradition like a knife through cloth. It didn't matter that Jefferson never said those exact words. It felt like he had. Pam Bondi, sitting behind the president, didn't move. She didn't need to. Her silence wasn't fear. It was understanding. She knew enough about law to recognize when history was being made. Robert stayed still like stone, hands folded. But this time, the tension in his jaw showed his discomfort. Trump stepped away from the paper and looked out at the crowd of reporters, aides, and citizens packed into the chamber. When one judge, appointed for life, can stop a president from protecting the border, you don't have balance, you have tyranny with a nicer font. He bent down, picked up the dropped injunction order, and held it up. This is a document signed by one man who's never been elected, never faced voters, and never answered for the chaos it caused. He turned to the court. We had agents at the southern border, ready to stop cartel smugglers. Within hours of this order, they were told to stop, not because the law changed, but because one man typed a sentence in a PDF and hit send. Then he looked back at the camera. They don't want a bench. They want a throne. And I'm telling you now, this nation won't live under robes. Elon was watching the screen. The post was now trending worldwide with the hashtags Bench v. Spallet and Tosh Court Takeover. Thousands of Americans were commenting, not just Trump supporters, but independents and even some Democrats. It wasn't about party anymore. It was about control. Justice Yang leaned towards Roberts, whispering something only he could hear. But Roberts didn't move. Not yet. Trump's voice lowered, not tired, but focused. I was elected to do a job. You may not like how I do it. That's fair. That's democracy. But if unelected judges can erase policies without debate or vote, then this republic no longer belongs to the people. He turned back to the justices. It belongs to the people in this room. Then slowly, he pulled out a second sheet from his folder. This one was blank on one side, but on the other was a handwritten quote in bold ink, underlined twice. He read it aloud. Power without accountability is not justice. It's theft. He held it up for everyone to see. And that's what this has become. A quiet, careful theft of the people's voice. He dropped the page onto the floor. There was no sound, no cough, no shuffle of feet. Just the cold, perfect quiet of a moment too important to be interrupted. Outside, protesters were chanting. Police barriers were strained. Reporters clutched their phones in disbelief. Some didn't know if they were covering a government event or a revolution happening in real time. Back inside, Trump gave the final words of the section with the same cold fury he had since entering. If Roberts won't fix it, then we will. And we'll do it legally, constitutionally, but completely. Elon was watching the screen. The post was now trending worldwide with the hashtags Bench v. Spallet and Court Takeover. Thousands of Americans were commenting, not just Trump supporters, but independents and even some Democrats. It wasn't about party anymore. It was about control. Justice Yang leaned towards Roberts, whispering something only he could hear. But Roberts didn't move. Not yet. Trump's voice lowered, not tired, but focused. I was elected to do a job. You may not like how I do it. That's fair. That's democracy. But if unelected judges can erase policies without debate or vote, then this republic no longer belongs to the people. He turned back to the justices. It belongs to the people in this room. Then slowly, he pulled out a second sheet from his folder. This one was blank on one side, but on the other was a handwritten quote in bold ink, underlined twice. He read it aloud. Power without accountability is not justice, it's theft. He held it up for everyone to see. And that's what this has become. A quiet, careful theft of the people's voice. He dropped the page onto the floor. There was no sound, no cough, no shuffle of feet. Just the cold, perfect quiet of a moment, too important to be interrupted. Outside, protesters were chanting. Police barriers were strained. Reporters clutched their phones in disbelief. Some didn't know if they were covering a government event or a revolution happening in real time. Back inside, Trump gave the final words of the section with the same cold fury he had since entering. If Roberts won't fix it, then we will. And we'll do it legally, constitutionally, but completely. But the final blow didn't come from the podium. It came from the people watching at home. The next morning, America didn't wake up confused. It woke up certain. Every major network played the confrontation over and over again. Clips flooded social media, some just seconds long, showing Trump holding the declaration, Roberts frozen mid-reaction, and the paper hitting the floor. But those short clips carried the weight of an entire era. On local radio stations in Bakersfield, Fresno, Mobile, and Amarillo, callers weren't talking about party lines anymore. Watching a live segment on News Nation, the commentator paused mid-thought and said, "We're not just witnessing politics anymore. This is constitutional course corrections." He turned to him. "You think this will last?" Trump didn't answer right away. He was staring at the copy of the Declaration that now hung on the Oval Office wall, placed just inches from where Obama's mirror had once been. "It won't last unless we stay louder than the silence," he said. Pam stepped in, the left's already mobilizing editorials, calling this judicial intimidation, legal experts on cable saying it sets a dangerous precedent. Good. Trump said, let them scream. They had been protected by silence for too long. We didn't break the system. We broke the illusion. Across the country, people didn't respond with anger. They thought about it. Retired factory workers in Ohio, ranchers in Arizona, a high school civics teacher in Wichita Falls. He printed out the speech and had his students read it line by line. This wasn't about one party, one case, or one judge. It was about the fear that the people's voice had been taken, not by guns or armies, but by signatures, robes, and courtrooms no one could enter unless they were called. That fear now had a name. And so did the pushback. Elon's Court Lite app reached 5 million downloads in just 72 hours. The Judicial Accountability Act got support from both political sides, from states that hadn't agreed on anything in years. For the first time in over a decade, a Gallup poll showed that trust in the federal courts dropped below 35%. But Trump didn't hold rallies or tweet about winning. He just went back to his desk, opened the folder again, and wrote down names. Not enemies, just reminders of what happens when power goes unchecked for too long. Trump wasn't done yet. For him, this wasn't about winning. It was about sending a warning. The storm had passed, but the sky wasn't clear yet. Across the country, people's living rooms were still quiet. Dinner tables were buzzing with questions. Radio hosts were still talking about every second of that broadcast. But under all the noise, one thing was changing. People were thinking, really thinking. Not about which side won, not about left or right. They were thinking about something deeper, something they hadn't thought about in years. Who's really in charge? In a small apartment near Flagstaff, Arizona, 62-year-old Marlene Cross sat on her couch, laptop open, focused. She hadn't voted in the last 2 elections, not because she didn't care, but because she didn't think it mattered anymore. But that night, something changed. When she saw the president tell the Supreme Court that their silence had turned into power, it stirred something in her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel ignored. She felt seen. In Jackson, Mississippi, former Marine Corey Bell watched the broadcast in a barber shop. He didn't say anything while the clip played, but when it ended, he turned to the others and said, "That's what I've been trying to explain for years." The Supreme Court used to be the one branch people still believed wasn't political. But now people are asking, if judges can stop a president from doing his job and they don't have to answer to voters, is that still democracy? A history teacher stood in front of her class. She was holding a paper with Trump's final words. She read it slowly. "We're going to take it apart, legally, by the Constitution, but fully." Then she looked at her students. "What does that mean to you?" she asked. One student raised his hand. "It means the rules can't protect people if they're only being used to protect themselves." That was the lesson. This whole fight wasn't just about one executive order or one judge. It was about a government that had slowly started working for itself, not for the people. For many years, people were taught that courts are fair, judges are wise, black robes stand for balance and justice. But what happens when those robes are used like shields? What if being neutral is just an excuse to do nothing? Trump didn't yell. He didn't curse or blame anyone. He held up the U.S. Constitution, the country's main law, and asked a question that many were scared to ask. Who really runs this country? And the answer was not simple or comforting. Not Congress, not the president, not even the voters. It seemed like the system itself had become too comfortable. It worked in silence, without being questioned. Now, just asking a question felt like an attack. But it wasn't an attack. It was a reminder. Real power belongs to the people. Checks and balances in government aren't just for show. They are real. If any part of the government becomes too powerful, and no one can question it, then it doesn't matter how old the building is or how polite the words are. It's not a republic anymore. It's just a throne, with guards pretending to be judges. Weeks later, outside the Supreme Court, someone taped a handwritten sign to the wall. It didn't say Trump 2024 or Vote Red. It said, "We gave you trust, not immunity." That message wasn't only for Judge Roberts. It was for all leaders, judges, politicians, and officials, anyone who forgot that America runs on people, not just rules. The summit was over, but something had changed, and that change came with one clear truth. If democracy is real, it doesn't live in robes or courtrooms. It lives in people's voices, loud, not perfect, but free. If you believe this country belongs to the people, speak louder than the silence. Subscribe, and stay aware.